some of the key future trends that the geospatial ecosystem is likely to undergo, and in some cases already undergoing, is the continued exponential growth of data volume. This data volume has been growing exponentially for a while, but there's nothing on the horizon that suggests that to change anytime soon. And we also see that the complexity of that data is growing. So 2D data is becoming 3D data. Satellite imagery with 12 bands is becoming 700 bands. And we see that quite a bit. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. Another one is the increased pervasiveness of emerging technologies like AI. We already see that application quite a lot within the geospatial space, but that will only continue to grow. I also expect we will see some changes and revising around data security and ethics, also related to, for example, the rise of AI. And then there is also the growing need for integration between spatial data and non-spatial data. So not just integrating two types of spatial data like raster and vector, but having that properly integrated with data that is not spatial at all. That's another major trend that I expect to grow out quite a bit. And then, of course, another trend that I am expecting to rear its head in the future is that we'll see a steep growth in the number of end users of the geospatial industry, of the products that they're putting out, which won't be primarily in the number of GIS experts, but rather all other professionals that are looking to rely on spatial data more and more. When your spatial data infrastructure is not designed to anticipate these future trends, it is very likely that spatial data-driven workflows will start to clog up very significantly. I know this because we actually already see that quite a bit in the market. Just when you look at data volume and data complexity, for example, I get to talk to vendors of spatial data products, like, for example, within the real estate space, and see that a vendor has the very interesting problem of not being able to sell an updated version of last year's data set because their client is telling them that they haven't had the proper chance to get that data set ingested, integrated, and as such yield its value. And that's a very painful problem for both the vendor as well as for the buyer. And it's also both of their responsibilities, if not more so on the vendor side, to make sure that data is easy to ingest, and that requires a smart spatial data infrastructure. If you want your spatial data infrastructure to be future-proof and you're ready to not just brace for, but embrace these trends that have been mentioned earlier, you want to make sure of basically 5 things. First and foremost, you want to have your spatial data infrastructure be interoperable. There's no other way around this because you can't foresee every single user endpoint. You can't foresee every tool that you may want to use in the future. You can't foresee any use case. So making sure that you have all the flexibility that you can have and making sure that you're not locked in with a single vendor is very important. Scalability is another one that's obviously very important. You want to make sure that a data infrastructure is built up in the cloud, so at any point in time you can scale it up or down. There's also an importance around making sure that your data governance and your data security, including access management, is set up in a very granular way, just to anticipate on more stringent demands around this and more custom demands as well. It's always good to make sure that whatever infrastructure you end up with applies a user-centric design. This seems obvious, but many solutions these days do not do that whatsoever, and it's important to keep thresholds low. And lastly, it's great if you can already anticipate on emerging technologies and make sure they have a place within your infrastructure.